Good morning and welcome back to Morning Coffee Live. If you joined us yesterday, we jumped into the Nielsen annual marketing report for 2023 or 2024. I'm not sure how they labeled theirs, but we got about halfway through and gonna jump back in today. So, looking at yesterday, we do a really quick recap. We looked through, we saw the highlights. Their sections are spending optimism, marketing misalignment, media balance, MarTech mismatch, in conclusion. We looked at their four themes being that spending optimism is up, marketing tactics KPIs are misaligned, digital dominance may hurt holistic returns, and measurement confidence is high but incomplete. We looked through spending optimism, that ad spends up and it's earmarked for quote unquote effective channels. And we looked at the anticipated changes. Global marketers plan to increase their digital spend overall, they're saying, expect to allocate more than 63% of their budgets to digital channels as well in 2024. They're leaning into the perceived effectiveness of channels. And see social media on top and search moving on down all the way through coming in the bottoms, native. And then we got as far as global marketers plan to up retail media network investment. All right, and then finally, how social media and search spending measure up. This is kind of where we left off yesterday. Um, it's an interesting part here when they say the allure of digital media has clear merit. But in looking at marketers' top objectives for the year, Nielsen's outcome data doesn't support some of marketers' planned media allocations. Social media, for example, continues to garner the biggest market increases among global marketers. Over the past 3 years, the average ROI of social media has been 36% higher than the average ROI across all media. Brand impact data also illustrates that 75% of people who are exposed to social ads say the ads made them more likely to purchase, use, or consider the brand. So, at a high level, the shift in spending makes sense, but the results vary significantly across brands. The top 25% of brands from an ROI generation perspective are six times more successful than the bottom 25%. Comparatively, the average ROI of search, which is the second most favored channel, has been 51% lower than the average ROI across all media over the past 3 years. So, what it says is that even if they're the biggest used channels, it doesn't always mean it's the correct channel for everyone who's using them. There's always winners and losers, but the performance gaps here, while not benchmarks, are noticeable. ROI benchmarks aren't brand level blueprints. Brand variability is very important when considering ROI averages. That's because absolute ROI will include brand level factors that aggregations will mute, including industry, market, advertising budget, and company size. Marketing mix modeling is critical for understanding media impact. Marketing mix modeling insights allows to balance effectiveness and efficiency at scale and scale those learnings across brands, stacks, and partners. By using detailed ROIs, response curves, and saturation points, we can now make smarter data-driven decisions to maximize returns. Very important, making sure that you're modeling, you're looking beyond just vanity metrics and you're doing some kind of full modeling mix. If you have the software and everything and the tech stack, there's some great marketing mix software out there. If not, this is something that marketers should be able to do on their own. You should be able to look at your different campaigns and put together a holistic look at the return and how they're impacting revenue at a company. Okay, so jumping into new stuff, the takeaway. Marketers continue to dedicate. Make this a little bigger now. There we go. Okay. That looks pretty good. The takeaway, marketers continue to dedicate more of their budgets to digital channels because of their perceived effectiveness. But what's effective for one brand might not work as well for another. And today's budgets don't always allow for expensive trial and error. Yeah, that's an interesting one right there because it's true. What's effective for one brand will not work as well for another. One brand, social may be where you want to go really hard. Other brands, it's really more about just catching that low hanging fruit. If you don't have a brand story, you're just trying to push an individual product. You're going to want to focus on programmatic retargeting and SEM and digital channels like that where you can drive direct conversions. At the same time, if you're trying to do a holistic marketing of a company, you're trying to build a name for a brand, you're trying to show product, you're trying to do full package marketing, if you will, not just sell something or a product or product marketing or demand generation, you really do need to get in those other channels. And now, while they say the budgets don't always allow for expensive trial and error. Yeah, budgets have been shrinking for the last few years. That does not mean that you get rid of testing. A/B testing, quote unquote, trial and error, is still a very large part of marketing. There's no magic bullet. There is no one way that you can approach a marketing task and know it's going to work. You have to have clear goals. You have to have clear strategies. You have to have clear tactics. You need to know your KPIs and what you're measuring against. Um, because it is expensive. But even when you put all that together, it's no guarantee for success. You still need to be open to some a certain level of trial and error, not trial and error as much as A/B testing, testings against each other, continual testing and optimization at all times. Okay, how do you say relevant is if mass reach campaigns are too costly? Well, there's many ways. Let's see what they say. Once you identify your campaign's true goal, focus your spending on the channels that deliver the most ROI for your specific KPI. Broadcast radio, for example, is a less expensive weighted average CPM than streaming audio and delivers a higher weighted average ROI. I think that's misleading. So I'm not saying it's incorrect, right? Broadcast radio is less expensive with a weighted average CPM than streaming audio. And it may also deliver higher weighted average ROI. I'm not doubting that. But I don't think that's universal. I think that's very geo dependent. When you look at broadcast radio versus streaming radio, broadcast radio still has one major advantage, and that's the automobile, the car. People still listen to it in the car, and they still listen to it in smaller, generally mom and pop shops, diners, things like that, little places where they have the radio on inside their business establishment instead of having a official music or whatever it may be music setup. You'll see radio running there, but mostly radio is the car and commute hours. So the commute time, morning and evening, the traditional commute hours, for a large portion of the country, radio's still very big. When you get into some of the bigger cities, when you're hitting this, New York City, Atlanta, San Francisco, San Jose, San Diego, LA, Boston, Austin, Texas, Miami. When you start hitting the bigger cities, you're and especially when the crowd skews younger overall, you're going to have a lot more people doing streaming audio than you're going to get radio. When you hit the Midwest and you were more rural through the whole country, you're going to have a lot better performance on broadcast because there's a lot more people listening to it. Um, Also, broadcast is a great way to get in front of different people. For example, you see a lot of Hispanic radio stations in California that are still very popular because they've taken over a lot of the radio there. So, if you're doing stuff for the Hispanic market, radio can also be very useful. You're going to find more there than you generally will on streaming. If you're looking for a college age crowd for your product, though, for example, you're going to want to go streaming audio. The college age crowd and younger isn't going to be listening to the radio as much as they're going to be on streaming audio. And the reason is they're listening to all their music on their iPhones and they're doing it while they're at school. They're not commuting to work every day. They're living on campus, etc. So the moral of the story is yes, broadcast radio is less expensive and has a higher weighted average ROI than streaming audio, but it's very audience dependent. It's very geo dependent. If you are selling, a home product for middle aged, people in rural farm areas, yeah, radio is going to perform incredibly well for you compared to streaming audio. If you're selling a product to freshmen just entering college, it's not going to be your best bet. That's where you're going to want to hit streaming. Let's explore new media channels like podcasts and branded content, relatively affordable options that are proven to deliver. Our norm databases show that ads in these channels can boost brand awareness by as much as 11 percentage points. Huge yes to this. New media channels are they're not new. It's just not the traditional digital media channels, but things like podcasts, things like branded content, things like direct sponsorship by hosts of talk shows, etc. They tend to be inexpensive, have very large reach, and they have the added benefit in many different cases of having either an implied authenticity or implied endorsement of whoever is doing the ad or whatever channel you're on. If you're doing it like on a podcast, for example, and I'm reading your ad to you, you get my implied endorsement by the fact that I'm reading your ad. New media channels or various media channels, smaller media channels, getting in front of a niche audience is can be incredibly valuable. If you understand your ICP really well and you know where those people are, figure out what media they're actually consuming and put your product in front of them. Doesn't matter what that channel is. You may go, oh, but it's not. Where are they on social? Well, no, they may not be. Maybe they're all watching Joe Rogan's podcast, right? Maybe you need to figure out how to get on there. Maybe they're all, on TikTok watching a certain creator. Well, I'm not a big fan of TikTok and it looks like it might be going away. If you have a product that specifically speaks to that audience, that's where you're going to want to put it type thing. So yes, exploring meet different and new media channels, great idea. So that's it for section one. Should have finished there yesterday instead of here, but I wasn't actually paying attention to the slide numbers. Two, marketing misalignment. Long-term goals need a long-term focus. Just say that one more time. Marketing misalignment. Long-term goals need a long-term focus. Far too often, you see companies coming with all these long-term goals they're trying to achieve, but all the focus is on the right now. Where's the sale? Today, we need to grow revenue. And the thing is, those two things don't always work together as well as you think they should. There's different strategies for long term and achieving long term goals than there are for short term. And long term goals do take a long term focus. Marketing is not instantaneous. It's not like you put out an ad and boom, all your objectives are completed. It's done. Let's move on. It's a process and it does take time. So completely agree with this. A performance marketing upswing. Marketers' top objective of revenue growth is a clear reflection of the recession fears that loomed large in 2023. And this is where everyone's focused right now. Everyone's just looking at revenue growth. Economic uncertainty notwithstanding, marketers' stated objectives and strategies highlight a notable disconnect from their desired KPIs. From a planning perspective, global marketers' most important KPIs are long term ROI and full funnel ROI. But a shift towards performance marketing combined with some of their media buying plans won't fully support these goals. Yeah. So from a planning perspective, if your most important KPI is long-term ROI and full funnel ROI, then your media plan needs to have, first of all, a good budget split at the highest level between brand and demand marketing. Brands getting pushed to the wayside right now with everyone's cutting budgets and focusing on we must make money, we must make it now. And they are putting brand to the side. And I think it's a huge mistake and it's very short-sighted because you're taking the quick win, right? But you're losing out on the sustainability, and that is not where you want to be. So, inflation, consumer spending, and supply chain uncertainties are marketers' top considerations for media planning in 2024. Consequently, they plan to lean more heavily on performance marketing and less on brand building to meet their top objective for the year, revenue generation. Yeah, it's a flawed approach. So, inflation, consumer spending, and supply chain uncertainties should definitely be considerations. Those should never be a marketer's top considerations. Their top considerations should be how do they achieve their goals in face of inflation, consumer spending, and supply chain uncertainties, and figuring out how to plan around those things. Just because there's inflation or there's consumer spending's down or the supply chains have been breaking all over the place with COVID. We had a huge chain issue in tech for a while. With the Baltimore Bridge, we had a supply chain issue on a smaller scale. You can't plan your marketing at inflation spending uncertainties. You can't have those your top considerations. Those just need to be factors in how you achieve your goals, making sure you can achieve them in spite of those things. 70% of marketers say they'll likely use more performance marketing in the 2024 media share. It's not 70%, it's like 99% in my experience. Everyone's moving more towards, here they're calling it performance marketing, but more moving just more towards demand-based marketing versus brand marketing. And yeah, 80% want to shift spend to digital channels, 77% increase spend on newer channels, CTV, influencer, etc. Uh, I've seen growth in connected television in the influencer market, not to this level. I mean, people always say it. I would be surprised if 77% of people, not in the slice, but that 77% of people reported that they plan to increase it. At the end of the day, how many actually will? My guess is it'll be like 30, 40%. Increase performance marketing spend, reduce brand building. Now here it says 70%. I think that's probably actually going to be, 70% are saying they will do it. My guess is 90% will end up doing it because they're going to be told to. That's the trend that things have been going the last few years, and well mistaken, just what's been happening. Focus spending on less expensive channels, i.e., not TV. Once again, completely believe the number. I think this is very misguided. Um, The channel selection, well, yes, the expense comes into play and it's a factor. Channel selection, it should be related to your audience, your ICP, your ideal customer profile, and how to get in front of them, not on the cost of the channel. If one channel costs $1 and gets me very large spread, let's say one channel costs, to make the numbers easy, there's two channels I have to pick from. One costs $1 and it gets me 100 people, and the other one costs $100 and it gets me one person. Well, based on, if you're focused on spending less and your KPIs, you're going to go for the $1 channel with 100 people on it. And you're going to go, look at me, I got 100 impressions, I got 100 clicks, and it only cost me $1. The problem is if the one person, if my ICP contains the one person that costs $100 and not those 100 people that cost $1, I'm going to put $100 and get the one person every time, because that's the customer I need. So it's not about the expense of the channel. It's about the expense of acquiring your customer. So, well, once again, to me, it's a data point where, be careful. If you're focused on the price, not on the outcome, you're going to have some issues there. And reduce ad spending. Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to, but it's happening. You can't avoid it. Uh, Generally, it's not the best idea to reduce your ad spending as things go down. That's when you want to pump more in to increase your market share and sustain. But we're seeing it. We're seeing a constant reduction. And part of it is we're still balancing out post COVID. Declining spend across traditional brand building channels as global marketers plan to shift more of their spend to digital channels where they can more easily track and connect their spend to revenue. They're also pulling back on spending on traditional mass reach channels like TV and radio. In our annual marketing survey, global marketers report reducing their linear TV and AM/FM radio spend in the last 2 years. Sure, the channels are slowing it overall with radio and TV just due to the alternatives popping up and increasing in their size and scope. But once again, people need to stop thinking about where they're spending from a dollars and cents point of view and a how do I track point of view. And they need to think about how do I get in front of the correct audience. And then you figure out how to track your results and show the value. But at the end of the day, marketing's right message, right place, right time. If you got to get to the right place at the right time. And if you have to do that through linear TV, you do that through linear TV. If it's AM/FM radio, you do that through AM/FM radio. If you have to do that through connected TV, you do it through connected TV. But don't ignore them just because they're not the in thing anymore or because of cost. Conversion focused marketing is only half the funnel. So, conversion focused marketing efforts, promotions, retargeting are attractive because they're easy to quantify and can be helpful in gaining quick sales. But they do little to attract new customers and they can lead to brand erosion when used outside of a holistic marketing strategy. Committing to spending for advertising can be difficult even for massive multinationals. We saw this firsthand when global brands like Coca Cola, GM, and Netflix hit the brakes on their brand building efforts after the COVID-19 pandemic arrived in early 2020. Yeah, very true. When COVID hit, all the big companies, they just put a halt to brand. Everything went to demand. It was just, well, not all of them, but most of them. And it was really about sales, 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 in your revenue, close deals, close deals, now, now, now. And it was to hell with our brand. We need to make money. Um, and those types of decisions can be costly. As Nielsen Compass data shows that a brand loses an average of 2% of future revenue for every quarter it stops advertising. Not sure where they got to that number, but I'd say it's probably pretty darned accurate. However, the inverse is also true. Investment in brand building marketing can drive revenue growth. Understanding the values and outcomes each offer will help marketers deliver full funnel ROI. A 1 point gain in brand metrics such as awareness and consideration drives a 1% increase in sales. Once again, I don't know where that number comes from or how accurate and how transferable it is, but as a general rule, the concept here of brand versus demand, everybody's moving to demand right now, and they are ignoring brand. It needs to stop. Here's the problem. Demand's a one-time sale. You get someone in the door, you sell them a product. And you only get them if they're currently in the market right now, today, at this moment to buy your product. Other research, pull it up at some point, but it's out there everywhere, shows that only about 3% of your target market of people who would or will buy your product, will be willing to buy your product, only about 3% of them are going to be in the market to purchase at any given time. The other 97% are not actually at the purchase stage. Maybe they don't know they need your product yet. Maybe they don't need it now. They're going to need it 6 months from now. Maybe they, whatever it may be. Only about 3% of your market's currently in market. So your conversion base, your demand marketing is really only hitting 3% of your market valuably. So let's say you could get in front of your entire market. Let's say you have your ICP and you could determine every single one of them exactly where to find them, and you know the right channel, so you can get there at the right place in the right time. And you put the money in and you put your message out there, your conversion based message in front of your entire market. So every one of them sees it. Only about three of them are going to buy your product. Well, that's why brand campaigns are so incredibly valuable. What if you put your message out in front of all the people instead of trying to sell something, you just gave instead a brand building message, information, something positive about your brand of some sort, hell, even just exposure to your brand. You give that to that same market. Well, now you may not, the 3% who are looking to convert immediately may not be as quick to click and go, oh, buy, because of your message being a brand based message versus a demand based message. But the other 97% who are looking at your message, who see your message, are now going to be getting prepped to purchase in the future. Don't forget that 3% in market isn't the same 3% of people every day. It's constantly changing as time goes on. And so when that 97% becomes the 3%, as it rotates through and they're becoming the ones buying, if you've been doing brand to all of them, you already have exposure and you already have them interested. So instead of, say, forgetting brand campaigns entirely, doing conversion campaigns and catching your 3%, why not do brand campaigns to the 100%? Use KPIs like CPM versus CPC for your optimization to keep your costs down and hit them at as low of a, you know, cost per milli, which is just an impression metric, as you can to get in front of them. Hit them with a, frequency that's enough to make sure you're staying top of mind without driving someone crazy and making them hate your brand. And then having it where once they've clicked, the landing page with more information, anyone who clicks has now shown more interest than the average, which means most of your 3%ers are also going to be your clickers. Have them use retargeting campaigns from there, like say programmatic, display retargeting campaigns. Retarget the people who've shown interest in your brand messaging with your demand messaging. And now you're going to get that 3% who's already ready to convert, while also hitting your entire brand audience. And if you only do your demand campaign, like for, this example, let's say through retargeting, you're actually going to keep your conversion budget smaller to only serve the people who are in market to buy. Because the 97% that aren't actually in market who are just interested, you don't need to spend the money putting your ad in front of your conversion based ad in front of them anyways. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying that you need brand building for conversion. That brand is so important, it's not funny, and it needs to be a good mix between brand and demand. When you cut brand budgets, you put everything in demand, you are looking at a short win. You are looking at increasing sales in the short term And you're going to find yourself strategically in the same spot 6 months down the road, 3 months down the road, a year down the road. You're going to be in the same spot as you were chasing your tail because you never invested in a larger brand play to make you relevant in the longer term. Brand building is critical for long-term ROI. In addition to helping stay at top of mind with consumers, always on upper funnel marketing is critical when marketers are focused on long-term and full funnel ROI. The importance can't be understated. As Nielsen research has found, ongoing market efforts account for 10 to 35% of a brand's equity. And the ROI norms database in Nielsen Compass highlights how the long-term impact of media can even double the impact of media, in particular channels like TV. This is marketing talk right here. Nielsen, they're trying to sell you Nielsen Compass and tell you it doubles. It's not actually talking about data we're looking at right now, and they didn't give the data to back it up. Brand building is more than just seed long-term sales. It also moderates the costs of new customer acquisition. That's because short-term marketing strategies trade future sales for near-term sales that are actually more costly to obtain. This ties right into what I was saying. It's a huge point. Brand building moderates the cost of new customer acquisition. How does it do that? Well, when you're doing brand versus demand tactics, on brand tactics, you're usually optimizing towards KPIs of like CPM and reach and frequency. Whereas with demand targeting, you're usually paying on a cost per click, cost per site visit, cost per conversion, things like that. Your tactics at that demand level are more expensive tactics. Cost per click's a lot more than cost per impression. If you've already introduced your audience to the brand because you've had ongoing branding, well, the overall cost of conversion is going to be cheaper because it's easier to find the ones in market and you don't need to spend as much on that cost per click, that cost per site visit, etc. Also, if your market's 3% and you're only marketing your demand campaigns to that 3% or with some expansion, obviously, you're just going to be spending less money on those tactics overall. And those are the ones that eat the big budget. So, absolutely, brand building moderates costs for new customer acquisition. It's just hugely important. Measuring an ROI case study, measuring the effectiveness of brand building campaigns. Um, they worked with Roundel, Target's retail media network, to understand media effectiveness and impact on key brand metrics and consumer perception of Hanes, an American clothing company. Hanes wanted to drive brand and sales metrics during a 12-week multi-channel campaign. Roundel used Nielsen's brand impact for in campaign to understand how they improve brand recognition and perception. The in-flight analysis enabled strategic insights for improvement during the campaign. Nielsen brand impact revealed. About 60% of exposed respondents indicated they definitely will or probably will consider purchasing Hanes the next time they shop for men's underwear at Target. The group exposed to the campaign had 20% greater association for Hanes than the group that was not. The group exposed to the comfort and maximum support message had an 11% greater association for Hanes than the group that was not. Version 1 of the creative was 25% more likely to indicate strong brand association. Version 2 drove 10% directional lift favorability. Even bigger than just this case study that kind of agrees with this case study, almost proves it. It tells you more about it. When you look at it, you see a 60% of his exposed respondents indicated they definitely will or probably will consider purchasing Hanes next time they shop for men's underwear at Target. Why is that? Why would 60% of them say they will? Well, it's not just because they saw the single ad, it's because they have an established brand. Hanes has done enough branded marketing through time that we know they exist, and so they just need to give out reminders. So that's another thing when you look at economies of scale. When you have over time, you're looking at time as a factor. When you have a brand that, let's say it's a brand new brand, you have a new underwear brand, you just start today, and you start doing marketing for it. People don't know who you are; they don't know your name, and so your marketing, really, your brand campaigns are just introducing people to the fact that you exist because nobody's heard of your company, and your demand would be selling underwear, right? In Haynes's case, they've been doing brand over years, which means that they don't even need to spend a fortune on brand marketing anymore because they already have an established brand. You just got to remind people they exist. I remember back, shoot, when I was a kid, you would see the commercials on TV. Wait till we get our hands on you. I've known the Hanes brand almost my entire life. I don't see ads for Hanes very often. In fact, I probably haven't seen one in a few years. But they've been branding over a long period of time, and therefore We know about them. And that brand makes you more likely to purchase them. Underwear is not something I don't think too many people get too invested in the brand. They probably buy what's cheap and convenient, but when they walk into Target and they look at the store, there's only one name jumping off the shelf at them where they know that brand, and that's Hanes. And that's where brand marketing has that value. There's a million underwear brands on the market. I guarantee you could go right now to Amazon, you can buy underwear from 1,000 companies. I mean, you can go on Target and you can probably find underwear from 100 companies. Go to any store and buy underwear. There's only one Hanes. And how do we know about Hanes? They've been doing branded marketing for many years, not just demand based. Demand based is where if you go on Amazon, you type in underwear, you see a quick ad pops up to buy your chonies now. That and that could be any company. Hanes has a brand because it's done marketing for that brand consistently for years. And so here what we see, this greater association, the group not exposed, yeah, that's the reminder. Most people didn't just learn about Hayes during this case study, I would assume. They've been around a while, right? But you see a Hanes ad today. I guarantee you anyone sees a Hanes ad today online. The next time they see underwear, think of underwear, they'll think of Hanes because there's that long-term brand and the ongoing advertising just reminds you that they exist. And when they remind you, all the previous stuff comes back up and it gets replay. I used the jingle a moment ago. Wait till we get our hands on you. I don't know if they've used that jingle in 20 years, but you know what? They're still getting they are still getting value out of at advertising from the 90s or 80s, whenever late 80s or early 90s, whenever that was, by doing advertising these days. Because every time I see a Hanes ad now, I still think of those old ads, right? Time is such a valuable thing. Long term brand value. That's what we're seeing here. Okay, moving on. The takeaway: there's monetary truth to saying out of sight, out of mind. If you let your brand decay, future sales tend to decline at a 1-to-1 ratio. It's kind of ROI minded intel you need when presenting plans to those who have ultimate say in budgets and when advocating for a full funnel approach. Some impact may be hiding in plain sight. Yeah, once again, very true. And out of sight, out of mind, there is the flip side to that. Um, when you have the history, you can refresh it, right? With Haynes. Just looking at a case study here reminds me of Haynes advertising and puts that brand back in my mind. And the only other, underwear brand, for example, I can think of is Fruit of the Loom. But when's the last time you saw an ad for them, right? Keep those advertisements running. Out of sight, out of mind, yes. You bring it back into sight, though, and you can flood back with everything you've done previously as well. So, how do you determine the right mix? Here are 3 steps to consider. Measure both KPIs, then plan and optimize a budget that drives both. Okay. Not sure, kind of a weird way to say that, but before deprioritizing a poor performing channel, measure its performance for the second objective to ensure you're not underutilizing a channel that is critical for the other objective. For channels that perform poorly on the chosen objective, determine if optimizations and execution can make the channels perform on par with the rest of the plan. I don't think this is how you determine the right mix. These steps just seem a little off. First, how do you determine? It's not measure both KPIs, it's determine your goals. And then for your mix, you go, okay, well, you determine your goals and you develop your strategy for what you're trying to do. And then you have to ask yourself, what channels fit into my strategy based on where's my audience? What's my message? What am I trying to achieve? When you put all that together, you have brand campaigns, demand campaigns. Those are going to each have their own goals, their own strategies, their own tactics, right? Um, doesn't mean that there can't be overlap, but those are independent campaigns. And so if you're running them that way, when the same measure both campaigns and plan to optimize a budget that drives both, maybe that's just saying splitting brand and demand into 2 campaigns and plan and optimize for both. Sure. I'm not sure what they mean by measure both KPIs, but I mean, brand is in a single KPI, demand is in a single KPI, but whatever. Before you're prioritizing a poor performing channel, measures performance for the second objective. That should be a moot point. Um, no matter what you're running, if when you put something on a channel, you should already have all the KPIs you're measuring mapped out and know exactly what they measure. You should be measuring for all these factors already. So it shouldn't be a thing of having to look at it for a second objective to determine. You should already have that all built into your media plan. And it's not about, oh, well, before I deprioritize, you don't approach your channels hoping for the best. You approach them with a clear strategy, and then you use your KPIs to measure, you optimize thereof, and then if it's not working, you do deprioritize because you already know that you're not reaching your KPIs. If you're doing it this way, it just means you didn't plan well enough up front. For channels that perform poorly on the chosen objective, determine if optimization and execution can make the channels perform on par with the rest of them. Once again, this to me is almost a moot point. If you're doing your media planning and optimization properly, you should already be beyond this. You should already have a testing strategy, a threshold strategy, everything else figured out for what to do. But definitely agree that out of sight, out of mind, keep the brand alive. ROI starts with reach. Jump into media balance. What do we got here? You know what? I'm going to come back to this one yet again tomorrow. We're at 35 minutes. We will jump into section three, media balance. Media balance is going to talk about what? Uh, Target reach by region, CTV penetration, and what it means about streaming. Assessing reach requires granular data. Channel diversity helps campaign reach. Underinvesting hurts ROI potential. Understanding channel effectiveness across objectives, and then an ROI case study. And then finally, we will take a look at the disconnect between insights and execution. I think that'll be a little more fun. That's a shorter section, but I think one that there'll be a lot of talk on. So I hope everybody enjoyed this running through the Nielsen AMR. I know it's not the most exciting thing in the entire world, but for any marketers out there, it's a kind of key component of our job. And I think staying on top of the industry news, what's going on, keeping up with things like Nielsen is just very important for all marketers just to know what's going on in their field. So hope to see you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Keep clicking on like and throw some comments in there. I would love to answer any questions, and I will see you all tomorrow. God bless and have a wonderful day.